The Tangerine Bear, Home in Time for Christmas, is a short, made-for-TV animated musical Christmas movie from the year 2000, based on a children's book from 1997, simply called The Tangerine Bear. It is a very simple, deeply mid children's movie, and it's also kind of insane as soon as you start to think about it.
Promise me you'll think about the implications!
Okay.
This video will contain spoilers for the movie, so if you want to go watch it first, that's your warning. Anyhow, before I get into the bulk of the video, I will give a little plot synopsis for those who haven't seen it at all or just want or need a refresher of what happens in the film. The film opens inside of a teddy bear factory. Due to some shenanigans with a mouse and a worker, one of the teddy bears ends up getting its smile stitched on upside down. This bear, who is voiced by Jonathan Taylor Thomas,
Everything the light touches. What about that shadowy place?
Is our central protagonist for the movie. He gets boxed up and shipped off, and we get a musical number from all the teddy bears about how they need to get bought. They end up at a popular store, and every bear ends up getting bought except for our bear because of his defect. So, he's put on a clearance table where he meets a miscolored monkey, who questionably is also the only black person in the main voice cast, and a doll who make him aware of his upside-down smile, which I guess he wasn't aware of prior to then. He's not bought from clearance, so he's moved once again and winds up at a second-hand toy store across town, where he meets a hyperactive Jack-in-the-Box voiced by Howie Mandel.
I think sitting is the new smoking.
A no-nonsense cuckoo clock bird, voiced by David Hyde Pierce.
We won't succeed on Broadway if we don't have any jewels.
And a horny mermaid clock voiced by Jenna Elfman.
What do you think is the key to keeping a marriage going that long?
Well, I mean, you have to have sex.
This toy store is owned by Mr. Winkle, a whimsical and wholesome old man voiced by Tom Bosley.
Farewell, my beloved. I thank you for all the love you've given me.
And is half-heartedly guarded by an English bulldog with anger issues named Virgil, who is voiced by John Polito.
Spider? That you? With a side gig?
Normally, I don't bother pointing out the voice cast in these sorts of things, but I do find some of those interesting, especially considering how obscure this movie is. Most of the rest of the film is spent with our bear, who eventually gets sun-bleached to be tangerine-colored, hence the title, as he gets closer with the other residents of the toy store and tries to get bought. The mermaid clock gets sold, Virgil has a redemption arc, Tangy almost freezes to death, and finally, a weirdly evil-looking toy collector comes along and shows an interest in Tangy and Jack.
It's a one-of-a-kind item, and therefore I'm offering you $200 for the bear and the Jack-in-the-Box.
However, Mr. Winkle decides they're not for sale, and the bear realizes that he never needed to be bought to find a family because he found a family with these other misfit toys anyways. What a cute little movie about found families and accepting what you have, and also cults. Remember how I said that there's a musical number early on with all the teddy bears from the factory? Okay, yeah, so this movie is a musical, but this is the only song that's actually diegetic or sung by any of the characters, and it single-handedly sets the course for the rest of Tangy's arc. The song is led by a bear named Theodore. Get it? Who is, by definition, a cult leader. A cult leader is a person who leads an organized group that is defined by its unusual or deviant beliefs, practices, and rituals. It's a group of bears quite literally organized by the factory. They all share the same belief that they need to be bought, and also break out into a whole song and dance while in a transport truck, which is definitely unusual, so I'm counting it. Cult leaders tend to be narcissists and sociopaths who manipulate and abuse their followers. I don't feel entirely comfortable armchair diagnosing a cartoon teddy bear with any sort of personality disorder, but it is notable that this fucking teddy bear independently names himself the leader of this group, and also he tells them that their success rate is strictly up to their own work ethic, which can definitely be seen as manipulative or at least dishonest.
How successful you will be is strictly up to you.
Cult leaders isolate their members from the rest of society and create a strong bond based on a common interest or goal. This one is a little iffy because their common goal depends so heavily on the relationships with outsiders, But their entire base for camaraderie is with this idea that Theodore drills into their heads that they need to be sold, so I'm counting it. Theodore is a cult leader, and you can't convince me otherwise. And, more notably, Tangy is indoctrinated by this cult very early on in his life. The sort of conditioning or brainwashing that is typically associated with cults is also built into this song. The song itself is quite short, but throughout, they still manage to repeat the same sentiment over and over again. We gotta get sold, we gotta get bought, we're gonna get sold, we're gonna get bought, we're gonna get sold, we're gonna get bought. Of course, from a songwriting perspective, the repetition is just because it's a song, and songs tend to repeat certain lines just to be more memorable. The actual repetition of the lines rarely has any sort of meaning. However, in the sake of fairness, I will highlight two musical theater examples that do give meaning to the repetition. In West Side Story, the main male lead, Tony, sings a song called Maria. The whole song is about how the name of the girl he just met, Maria, is such a beautiful name.
Maria, say it loud and there's music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying.
Because of this, he, of course, repeats her name constantly throughout the song. The repetition is given meaning. He's repeating her name to emphasize the beauty of her name, or at least the beauty he hears in her name, as that is ultimately subjective. It helps the song stick in your head and serves a purpose in the story, which is especially important for musicals. The other example that comes to mind is in the song Mortals and Fools from Death Note the musical. Yes, there's an official, professionally written musical adaptation of Death Note, and it's my favorite musical of all time, but that's besides the point. I do eventually want to make an analysis of Rim's character in this adaptation, so I won't go too into it here, but there's a song called Mortals and Fools that Rim, a god of death, or Shinigami, and Misa, a human she's required to look after, sing shortly after meeting. Misa is talking about how she's fallen in love with a man, and Rim is repeatedly telling her that love is for mortals and fools, and that falling for this man is unwise.
Love is for mortals and fools. Never turns out quite the way that you planned it. So why do you break all the rules?
She drills this concept repeatedly throughout the song. However, as the musical progresses, it becomes evident that Rim herself is falling in love with Misa.
Share a kiss and then surrender when love comes.
And there's even a reprise of the song sung between Rim and one of her Shinigami friends, Ryuk, as he realizes that she's falling for the girl, which is very dangerous for Shinigami to do. This line, love is for mortals and fools, that is repeated, is used to show care and protection for ones you care about, with Rim trying to protect Misa from the downsides of love, and Ryuk trying to protect Rim from getting hurt, since falling in love with mortals can prove fatal for Shinigami. More closely, one could even argue that Rim sings it in the first song to try and protect herself from falling in love with Misa, though that's not as explicitly clear in the lyrics themselves. There's repetition of the line, and each repetition has meaning as well as helping you remember the song better. The Tangerine Bear, a deeply mediocre film, somehow also does this, and they were definitely aware of this fact. This line, which is an extension of the mindset Theodore plants in this group of bears, including Tangy, is repeated by Tangy himself as he's sitting on that first shelf, and the narrator even credits it back to Theodore.
He tried to remember back to Theodore's advice and began to sing softly. I gotta get sold, I gotta get bought, I gotta get sold, I gotta get bought.
This idea was drilled so deeply into his head by the monster, that is Theodore, that it, word for word, is what he clings to in one of his lower moments. It doesn't stop there, though. This idea that he has to get bought in order to be properly fulfilled plagues him until the end of the movie.
Gotta get sold, I gotta get bought. I gotta get sold, I gotta get bought.
His concern the whole time isn't primarily in getting to know his new friends better or in familiarizing himself with the new environment. Sure, he does find solace in them, and he does learn a bit about the area he lives in, but his main priority is in marketing himself, even if it makes him uncomfortable, as we see with him staying on the uncomfortable chair to be more visible through the window, because that's what he was conditioned, indoctrinated, or brainwashed with since the moment he gained consciousness.
In time, the sun made his fur itchy, and his little bottom always ached because his chair had no pillow. But he never gave up hope that someday he'd find a home.
With this conditioning comes the issue of identity. Tangy is a teddy bear with an incorrectly stitched mouth and, later, sun-bleached fur. These are physical traits that he doesn't really have control over beyond him evening out his sun-bleaching upon noticing it affected his front side, and they set him apart from the other teddy bears from the factory. There's also hints that something else is different with him, like mentally, as we see him struggling to get through the cult song like the other bears do, but that much isn't really elaborated on, so I won't say anything further on that front. Regardless, Theodore's mindset didn't account for the fact that most people aren't going to want to buy a defective teddy bear, especially since these teddy bears seem to, for some reason, have an actual reputation in the universe of this movie.
Hey, Dad! That's the one! I changed my mind. I don't think I want this bear.
Oh, but son, we've been looking all over town.
His indoctrinated need to get bought directly clashes with the facts of his existence, which leads to a conflict when it comes to his identity, what he is versus what he's supposed to be. We see him try to cover up his misstitched mouth or distract from it, but ultimately he can't change it. He is what he is. This is explored more through visuals than anything, as we see several shots throughout the movie of him staring into his reflection, a visual device that's used very often to convey some sort of struggle with identity. Beyond this, there's also a song in which a voice that's clearly meant to represent Tangy laments over his lack of a smile.
Am I seeing what I see? Wonder if that's really me. Maybe this explains why people always turn away.
He struggles with this throughout the entire movie. However, at the end, when he realizes he's already found his forever home, we see that this also resolves his identity issue, which was caused by the ideas set within him since his conception. He doesn't need to get bought, so there's no real expectation for what he's supposed to be. There's only what he is, and what he is enough for his new family. When he looks at his reflection the final time, we see him smiling. Not because his physicality changed, but because that's what he sees now. Himself. Happy where he is and as he is. The mindset that Theodore installed in him and the countless customers who rejected him don't matter to him anymore because he has a family and he's happy with that.
Looking for a place to belong. Like words go to music to become a song. Someone to say goodnight to. Someone who really likes you. Just looking for a place to belong.
Wow, okay, I went into writing this video thinking it was mainly gonna end up being a shitpost, but now I've somehow managed to convince myself that this movie is a lot deeper than it really is. Was any of this messaging intended by the writers of the film? Probably not. Ultimately, I think it's a pretty simple movie, and the only real moral they probably intended for you to take away from it was be grateful, which is pretty standard for mediocre kids movies. I do mean everything I said in this video, to be clear. All of that messaging is there if you're looking for it, but intent is also important to keep in mind when analyzing, or perhaps overanalyzing, a piece of media. This movie is not very good, but it is charming and less than 50 minutes long, so I would heavily recommend giving it a watch, especially around the holiday season, if for no other reason than the mildly amusing voice cast and to poke fun at it. Also, I didn't know where else to put it, but I find it really funny that they had so little faith in the audience's ability to figure out what the joke with Theodore's name was, so they literally have him say it, but the way he delivers the line doesn't even make it funny. It's just kind of weird. This movie sucks.
My name is Theodore, but you can call me Teddy.
Yes, sir.